Action time in the Impact Zone!
World Championships are the one prize every wrestler is chasing, no matter what company or country you're talking about. Some belts become famous because the biggest stars in history held them. Others earned their prestige through decades of brutal matches, legendary reigns, and entire eras built around them. And what's crazy is, the most important titles in wrestling aren't limited to just WWE. Japan, Mexico, and old school America all have championships that carried real weight. So today, we're looking back at the 10 most prestigious world championships ever, the belts that truly felt like the top of the mountain. Join us as we count them down. WWE Championship. If you ask me what the single most important prize in pro wrestling history is, I always come back to the WWE Championship. This is the belt that, more than any other, became the symbol of being the guy. Even when I started watching in 2001, it already felt like the final boss championship, the one that meant you made it. Officially, the title began in 1963 when the WWF split away from the NWA, and the very first champion wasn't Bruno, it was Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, who became the inaugural WWF World Heavyweight Champion that April. Rogers didn't hold it for long, but he gave the new company an instant top star to build around. Then comes Bruno Sammartino, who defeats Rogers soon after, and this is where the championship's legendary aura really started. Bruno's reign wasn't just long, it was defining. He made the belt feel like something you carried for years, not weeks, and that seriousness shaped what the WWE title would become. From there, the championship evolves with every era. Hogan turns it into a pop culture trophy in the 1980s. Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels make it feel like the work rate crown of the 90s. Then the Attitude Era hits, and suddenly Austin and The Rock are fighting over it like it's the most valuable thing on earth. By the time you reach the Ruthless Aggression years, you've got guys like Triple H, Brock Lesnar, and Kurt Angle adding their own stamp to its legacy. Today, it's still regarded as the main prize. Drew McIntyre, he's the one holding it at the moment, taking it back from Cody Rhodes in a match that turned into total chaos, with outside interference helping swing things his way. He's defended it since, and he's basically doing what great WWE champions always do, making the title feel like the most fought over thing in the company. That's why this championship never stops being important. No matter what era you grew up in, this is still the belt everyone's chasing. NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Whenever I hear people talk about the real world title from back in the day, this is usually what they mean. The NWA World Heavyweight Championship dates back to 1948, when the National Wrestling Alliance was formed to unify the scattered territories. The very first recognized champion was Orville Brown, who became the belt's original standard bearer. After Brown was forced out due to injury, the title quickly became associated with legends like Lou Thesz, who helped define what a traveling world champion even meant in pro wrestling. From there, the belt became the centerpiece of the territory era, passed between icons like Harley Race and, most famously, Ric Flair, who turned it into the ultimate symbol of the old school world champion. But for a lot of fans, the defining NWA champion will always be Ric Flair. Flair turned the belt into something glamorous and ruthless at the same time, showing up in different territories as the world champion with the robes, the confidence, and the sense that you had to beat the absolute best to take it from him. What makes this title so prestigious is that it connects directly to the era where being world champion actually meant going town to town and proving it. Today, the championship still exists under the modern NWA promotion, but its power is mostly historical now. It isn't the center of the wrestling universe the way it was in the territory days, but the legacy is untouchable. When people call it the grandfather of world titles, they're not exaggerating. This is where the idea of the traveling world champion really came from. WCW World Heavyweight Championship, the Big Gold Belt. Man, the Big Gold Belt is one of those titles that doesn't even feel like it belongs to one company. It feels bigger than that. If you watched wrestling in the late 90s, you already know what I mean. That belt looked like a world championship the second it showed up on screen. WCW officially created the WCW World Heavyweight Championship in January 1991, right around the time they were breaking away from the NWA structure and building their own identity. The first WCW champion was Ric Flair, which honestly is the most perfect way to start, because Flair and that belt are basically inseparable in wrestling history. This title managed to carry the aura of the older NWA World title before WCW fully stood on its own. So even though it became WCW's championship, it never felt like some brand new invention. It felt like the next chapter of an already legendary prize. And the champions who held it are exactly what you'd want from a prestigious belt. Flair made it feel like royalty. Sting chasing it made him the heart of WCW. Vader holding it made it feel like the trophy of a monster. Then, the Monday Night War era hits, and suddenly Hogan has it, Goldberg has it, the NWO story is wrapped around it, and the belt is sitting right in the middle of the biggest wrestling boom since the Hulkamania days. When WCW died, WWE didn't just erase it. In 2002, they brought that same championship look back as the World Heavyweight Championship on Raw, because they knew fans still saw Big Gold as a real main event prize. WCW is gone, but the legacy of that belt is not going anywhere. It's still the most iconic world champion image in wrestling history. IWGP Heavyweight Championship. I didn't grow up watching New Japan live on TV, but once the internet wrestling world started buzzing in the 2000s, the IWGP Heavyweight Championship was always the belt people talked about with real respect. This title is basically New Japan's crown jewel, but I'll be honest, this belt has one of those histories that only wrestling could produce. It's prestigious, it's legendary, and it's also kind of complicated if you look too closely at the early days. The IWGP concept started in the early 80s when NJPW introduced the IWGP League tournament. And in 1983, that tournament actually crowned the first ever IWGP Heavyweight Champion. And yes, this is the part that still sounds surreal. Hulk Hogan was the inaugural champion, defeating Antonio Inoki in the finals. Hogan winning a major Japanese heavyweight title before Hulkamania fully exploded in America feels like some alternate universe trivia, but I swear it happened. Now, when most fans talk about the IWGP Heavyweight Championship's real prestige, they're talking about what the title became later. In 1987, NJPW established the championship in its more traditional form as a regularly defended top prize. From that point forward, it grew into the heavyweight standard of modern Japanese wrestling. This is the lineage that produced generations of true main event kings. Shinya Hashimoto helped define the belt's dominance. Keiji Muto carried it with that ace-level presence, and then Hiroshi Tanahashi came along in the 2000s and basically pulled New Japan back into relevance. Tanahashi's reigns made the title feel like it mattered again on a global scale, and then Okada took it into another stratosphere. Kazuchika Okada's time with the belt became the modern benchmark for what a dominant world champion looks like outside WWE. In 2021, NJPW officially unified the IWGP Heavyweight and Intercontinental titles to create the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship, even treating it as a fresh new lineage for a time. But the story didn't end there. In 2026, New Japan revived the classic V4 belt design and merged the lineage back together, retroactively recognizing the World Heavyweight Champions as part of the historic IWGP Heavyweight lineage again. That's the perfect way to sum it up. The name and belt designs may shift, but the IWGP Heavyweight Championship remains Japan's gold standard of prestige. Triple Crown Heavyweight Championship. The Triple Crown is one of those championships that honestly feels like it exists in its own category. When people talk about the greatest eras of pure heavyweight wrestling, 90s All Japan always comes up, and the Triple Crown Heavyweight Championship was the prize sitting right at the center of all that. The title was established in 1989, when All Japan decided to unify three major heavyweight belts: the PWF Heavyweight Championship, the NWA United National Championship, and the NWA International Heavyweight Championship, the one ultimate top prize. That alone tells you what the goal was. One champion, one mountain, no confusion. And the first man to hold it was Jumbo Tsuruta, which is basically the perfect opening statement for the lineage. If Jumbo is your starting point, you're already dealing with a serious historic belt. But the Triple Crown didn't become legendary just because of how it was created. It became legendary because of the wrestlers who turned it into something almost mythical in the 1990s. Mitsuharu Misawa is the name that towers over this championship. Misawa was carrying the emotional weight of an entire company. Then you've got Kenta Kobashi, Toshiaki Kawada, and Akira Taue, guys who made chasing this title feel like a war of survival rather than a storyline. These were long matches where the belt felt like it had actual gravity. What further made the Triple Crown so prestigious is that it represented the highest level of in-ring excellence. It wasn't about flash, it wasn't about being the loudest character, it was about being the toughest, most complete heavyweight wrestler alive. Even today, the Triple Crown is still active as All Japan's top championship, and winning it is still treated as a career-defining accomplishment in Japan. All Japan may not dominate the world the way it did in the 90s, but the prestige of this title has never really disappeared. The Triple Crown will always stand as the symbol of one of wrestling's greatest peaks. AEW World Championship. AEW is still the newest company on this list, but I'm not gonna lie, the AEW World Championship has already earned a level of respect that's kind of hard to ignore. When AEW launched in 2019, a lot of people were curious whether it would actually feel like a major league promotion, or just another alternative that burns bright for a year and fades out. And the world title was always going to be the real test. The championship felt important, the company would feel important. The belt was introduced in 2019 when the first champion being Chris Jericho. And honestly, that was the perfect choice. Jericho gave the title instant credibility because he already felt like a global wrestling name. It was basically AEW planting a flag and saying, yeah, we're not playing around. From there, the championship lineage got built by the exact kind of champions you'd want if you're trying to establish prestige fast. Jon Moxley made it feel gritty and fought over, like the belt could headline any arena in the world. Kenny Omega's run gave it that big match, international level aura. And then you get Hangman Page, which was one of the first reigns where AEW really proved they could tell a long-term emotional world title story. What I appreciate about this championship is that AEW, from the beginning, treated it like the main event prize. You don't see it defended in random throwaway matches. It usually feels like the belt is saved for big moments, big rivalries, and pay-per-view main events, which is how you build prestige quickly. Now, obviously, AEW doesn't have the 60-year history that WWE or the NWA has. It's still a young title, but prestige isn't only about age. It's about how a belt is presented, and AEW has done a strong job making this feel like the top of their universe. Even today, the championship remains the centerpiece of the promotion, held by the company's top star at any given moment, and every reign adds another layer to its growing legacy. It's basically the modern era's newest world title that already feels like it belongs in the conversation. WWE World Heavyweight Championship, 2002 to 2013. This one hits me with pure nostalgia because when I started watching wrestling in the early 2000s, this belt felt like the definition of a main event. The WWE Championship was obviously the top prize, but once the brand split happened in 2002, the World Heavyweight Championship became its own monster, and for a lot of fans, it felt just as important. This is the title that brought the Big Gold Belt back into the spotlight, and honestly, that alone gave it instant prestige. The championship was introduced in September 2002 when Eric Bischoff awarded it to Triple H after Brock Lesnar became exclusive to SmackDown with the WWE title. And from day one, it was positioned as Raw's top prize. Triple H's Reign of Terror era basically defined the early years of the belt, for better or worse, because it was always sitting at the center of the main event scene. But what really made this championship special was the run of champions who held it afterward. You had Shawn Michaels bringing that legendary aura, Batista turning it into the symbol of his breakout as a true top guy, Edge cashing in and making it feel chaotic, The Undertaker holding it and making it feel sacred, like the belt was tied to WrestleMania level greatness. And then there's the Cena and Orton years, where the title bounced between the faces of the company, but by that point it had become one of the most important belts of that era. If you were World Heavyweight Champion in the mid-2000s, you were a made man. The title remained active until 2013 when it was unified with the WWE Championship, officially ending the belt's separate existence. But the legacy never really disappeared. Fans still talk about Big Gold like it was the coolest looking world title ever, and the list of champions is absolutely stacked. And just to clear up one thing, because I know someone will bring it up in the comments, WWE did introduce a new World Heavyweight Championship again in 2023, but that's a separate modern title with its own fresh lineage, not a direct continuation of the Big Gold era belt from 2002 to 2013. The original World Heavyweight Championship we're talking about here is very much a specific time capsule, the raw main event prize of the ruthless aggression in early PG years, and that's why it still gets remembered with so much reverence. AWA World Heavyweight Championship. The AWA World Heavyweight Championship is one of those belts that doesn't get talked about enough today, which is funny because for a long time, this was a genuinely major world title in America wrestling. Before WWE became the one unstoppable giant, the wrestling world was full of powerful regional empires, and the American Wrestling Association was one of the biggest. And this championship was the center of that empire for decades. The title was introduced in 1960 when Vern Gagne broke away from the NWA system and established the AWA as its own promotion. The first recognized AWA World Heavyweight Champion was Pat O'Connor, a huge name in that era and one of the most respected champions in the business. But it didn't take long for Vern Gagne himself to become the man most closely tied to the belt's identity. Gagne wasn't just the promoter, he was also the ace, and the championship was built around him as the company's defining figure. As the years went on, the AWA title gained real prestige because of the champions who carried it. Nick Bockwinkel is probably the clearest symbol of the belt's golden age. He made it feel serious, legitimate, and almost classy in that old school world champion way. Then you had reigns from guys like Rick Martel and Larry Zbyszko, who kept the belt important as wrestling moved into the 70s and 80s. And here's one of those classic AWA weird footnotes that people still argue about. Hulk Hogan did briefly win the AWA World Title in 1982, beating Nick Bockwinkel, but it wasn't treated as a normal, fully recognized reign. The story goes that the switch happened under controversial circumstances, where the decision quickly reversed and Hogan's time with the belt ended up being more of an odd asterisk than a celebrated championship run. Still, the fact that a rising star like Hogan was even involved in the AWA's world title picture right before he exploded into Hulkamania shows how major this belt still was at that time. Of course, the AWA's decline became part of the championship story. Vince McMahon's national expansion changed the wrestling landscape. The AWA struggled to keep up, and by the early 90s, the promotion collapsed, leaving the title inactive. But even now, the legacy remains. For decades, being AWA World Heavyweight Champion meant you were one of the top heavyweight names in America, and the belt stands as a symbol of a lost era, when multiple world titles truly felt like rival thrones. CMLL World Heavyweight Championship. Mexico has its own rhythm when it comes to wrestling prestige, and that's why the CMLL World Heavyweight Championship feels so different from the belts most American fans grew up on. CMLL isn't built around constant title swaps or weekly shock changes. It's an old school environment, where tradition matters, where status is earned over time, and where a world championship feels more like a mark of long-term respect than just this storyline prop. The CMLL World Heavyweight Championship was introduced in 1991, and it's actually the very first CMLL World branded championship they created. The inaugural champion was Conan El Barbaro, who won the title on June 9, 1991. Over the years, the belt has been held by a relatively small group of wrestlers compared to something like WWE, which is part of what gives it that old school weight. Only 19 different wrestlers have held the championship across 23 reigns, and names like Universo 2000 and Ultimo Guerrero helped define its modern legacy inside Arena Mexico. It's not a belt that's passed around casually. When someone is champion here, it usually means the company sees them as a true heavyweight pillar, and the title is still active today, with Claudio Castagnoli currently holding it in his first reign. He won the championship by defeating Gran Guerrero on November 28, 2025, adding another interesting chapter to the belt's history. That's what makes this title so unique. It represents the top of CMLL's heavyweight scene, rooted in decades of lucha tradition, and it carries a quieter kind of prestige that doesn't need constant noise to feel important. TNA World Championship. The TNA World Championship is one of the most important second major company world titles wrestling has ever had. And if you were watching it in the 2000s, you remember why. For a while, TNA felt like the one place outside WWE where the world title picture actually mattered. But what's really interesting is that this championship didn't even exist at first because early TNA was tied directly to the NWA. When TNA launched in 2002, they operated under an agreement that allowed them to control the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. That belt was basically their top prize for years, but in 2007, the relationship between TNA and the NWA ended. And that's what directly led to TNA creating its own World Championship. The TNA World Heavyweight Championship was unveiled in May 2007, and the inaugural champion was none other than Kurt Angle. Angle winning it right away was the perfect credibility move because he instantly made the belt feel major league, and he's still the record holder for the most reigns with 6. From there, the title became the centerpiece of TNA's best years. AJ Styles made it feel like a homegrown crown. Samoa Joe brought that fighter aura. Sting holding it gave it old school world title legitimacy. Guys like Bobby Roode and Jeff Hardy carried it through later eras when the company was constantly shifting. And shifting is honestly part of this belt's story. When TNA rebranded as Impact Wrestling in 2017, the championship name changed too. Then the company briefly went through the whole GFW phase, where the belt was unified and renamed, before everything eventually settled back into the Impact World Championship name. Even in 2021, there was that strange moment where Moose carried a self-proclaimed TNA belt that later got sanctioned, leading to another unification. It's messy, but wrestling history usually is. In January 2024, the company officially returned to the TNA name, and the belt reverted back again as the TNA World Championship. Right now, the championship is still very much active. While Mike Santana is the current champion in his second reign, he won the title by defeating Frankie Kazarian on January 15, 2026, on Thursday Night Impact's AMC debut in Garland, Texas. No matter how many name changes the company goes through, this belt remains the symbol of TNA's legacy as the most significant American alternative world title of the pre-AEW era. And that's our list of the 10 most prestigious world championships in wrestling history. Some of these belts are still being fought over today. Others live on through legacy, but every single one meant something real when it was at its peak. This is the kind of topic wrestling fans could debate forever, so let's do it. Which world title did we absolutely have to include? And which one would you swap out? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this one, hit like, subscribe, and stick around for more wrestling history deep dives.